Hans Vrensen, you are Head of Strategy and Research Europe at AEW. Thank you for joining us on BiTV.
Thank you for having me, Luc-Etienne.
It's our pleasure. Even more so, it's our first BiTV interview in English of the year, so thank you for being with us. Let's start right now and talk about the report that AEW published at the end of last year, entitled 2024 European Outlook: Repricing Triggers Revival, in which you state that the elevated interest rates are expected to come down over the next year. It has been weighted by a lot of investors over the last couple of months. What are your expectations on the matter, and how could this impact real estate financing in 2024?
Yeah, I mean that's really been the crucial assumption clearly in our outlook, and I will say that the sort of initial signs, because of course there's still a lot of uncertainty in the market, but the initial signs actually that other people are starting to agree with our assumption that we made. We also are starting to see that, especially here in the UK, for example, mortgage rates are starting to come back down, and that's after inflation is coming down in line with our expectations, but perhaps a little bit more quickly than other people had expected. So we feel good about the assumptions that we've made for our outlook, and we see some initial evidence starting to come through that other people are also agreeing. In fact, the stock market for 2023 had a very, very good year, mostly on the back, I would say, of investors expecting central banks to start cutting rates in 2024. So again, that was not something that we knew when we did the projections ourselves, but it's nice to see that other people in other markets, I mean, obviously they're not real estate investors, but that other people in other financial markets are also starting to sort of confirm that with their pricing that they do in their markets.
Your report also states that after, and I quote, after a cumulative value decline of minus 17% since the peak in mid-year 2022 to year-end 2023, average prime capital value growth across Europe turns positive at plus 2% in 2024. How could this movement impact the different European markets from a geographic and sectorial standpoint after a 2023 year that was, let's say, a little slow in terms of activity?
Yeah. Well, so what we are talking about, of course, on the capital values is a prime capital value concept, and it is measured across all of the almost 200 market segments that we are able to measure from our side. So by the sheer breadth of the markets that we have many different markets. They're spread all over Europe. The average obviously hides quite a lot of differences. But having said that, the 2% recovery for 2024 is based on two things, really. First of all, as we already discussed a little bit earlier, the interest rates are coming down. That means that actually we expect a little bit of reduction in the cap rates or in the initial yields, especially over a 5-year holding period that we assume. And then in addition, rental growth is still in the market. And so that is something that is obviously different in different sectors. So the differences between the sectors and the geographies will be based on the differences in the changes of these two variables. And so if we just have a little sneak preview here at the differences between the sectors, for 2024 in particular, logistics and residential are our top markets for capital value recovery. Because they are still experiencing strong rental growth, and we are starting to see a little bit of a reversion of the yield widening that we've seen over the last 6-7 quarters. Now, so that's on the sectoral side. Offices are actually a little bit behind because for 2024 we're still expecting a little bit more widening and rental growth to be quite limited. But then later in the period, so we of course we don't only look at 2024, we look at the whole 5-year period, including 24. And then in the later parts of the periods, offices do perform a little better than the other sectors in relative terms. So if we look at the individual countries, then actually for 2024, Netherlands comes out quite strong as one of the key countries, but other countries that come out strong are Germany, um, and so that's actually perhaps not that surprising because these markets have always had quite low bond yields, and even though they widened out a little bit, they're expected to come back in. So and again, even though we have a little bit of an economic slowdown, the shortage of space in many of these sectors, particularly in logistics, vacancy rate in logistics across Europe is still below 3%. That means that if there is such a shortage, even if the economic growth is not super strong, we will still experience rental growth to come through. So those are some of the highlights of sector-specific and country-specific differences. I mean, I will say maybe to finish up, because of course, your channel is very focused on the French market. France is a little bit behind, and that's maybe interesting to note because the downside for the French market has been a little bit slower in coming down relative to other markets, particularly the UK. The UK had a much quicker sort of downturn and is therefore ready to recover a little bit more quickly. France has been a little bit more reluctant. The markets have been a little bit more stable, and it's been a little bit slower to come down. And therefore, we expect the French market to be a little bit slower in recovering. I mean, that is sort of perhaps a logical explanation that people can hopefully understand. There are some other specifics on the French market for valuation related issues that have also shown some delays there in the French market. But so that's maybe answering that question.
Thank you very much. Last year we spoke in May when there was not a lot of activity going on, if you remember, and at the time you said there is light at the end of the tunnel, but we are still in the tunnel. If
Yes.
these looks that we just discussed come to fruition, can European real estate investors hope to finally come out of the tunnel in 2024? Can we expect maybe investment volumes to rebound over the next year? Because as you stated in your study, they were cut by half over the last year.
Yeah, the volumes. I mean, obviously, the final numbers are still pending for the full calendar year. They have not been published yet, but we do expect it to be quite a big decline. I think the answer is probably yes. We will see a rebound in volumes, but the extent of that will really depend on how people are working out the bid-ask spread that is still in the market today. So the bid-ask spread is still quite high. There's a lot of potential sellers that have maybe still a historical high price in mind that they want to achieve. And there's now buyers in the market that are already obviously having adjusted their prices. And that is basically the standoff. I think if we can see the interest rates coming down, coming back to your first question, I think this will bring things in a better balance again, because a lot of investors have adjusted their price expectations based on the fact that they cannot use any financial leverage. So to finance the acquisitions, the debt is being too expensive. If the debt costs are coming down, then there will be perhaps a little bit more room again to finance acquisitions with some debt finance. And I think that will perhaps trigger this sort of bridging of the debt or of the bid-ask spread that we've been having. And okay, it might be somewhat quicker in some markets. We are quite optimistic on the UK market. We think there will be very solid returns, and that will probably also result in some better volume recovery. In some other markets like France, it might be a little bit of a slower process. I already explained a little bit. But it will definitely be a recovery. Our markets are quite cyclical. They have been for a long, long time. And I sort of guess that they will probably remain cyclical. It's something that is hard to avoid, but it will be recovering over time. So we're quite convinced that that the activity will return.
All right. Thank you very much, Hans Vrensen. A lot to look forward to in 2024. Thank you for this insight. Thank you all also for being with us, and we'll see you soon on BiTV.